Hey, I'm Bacon, and I am of an age, generation, and disposition where when I tell you that I have a large interest in World War II, you're going to say to yourself, well, no shit. Um, Strangely, on the back of that statement, I want to talk about implementing rituals and ritual items in your roleplay. Um, but this one's going to be a bit different as there's an accompanying front-loaded history lesson that I want to go over. Please do bear with me. I promise it does circle back around to role-playing at the end. I'm going to go over a very small piece of World War II history. It even actually extends to before the war, and that's going to be the history of the Lucky Strike cigarette. So, Lucky Strike was introduced as a chewing tobacco brand by R.A. Patterson Tobacco Company in 1871 in Richmond, Virginia. The name Lucky Strike referred to the gold rush. A lucky strike was a fortunate discovery of gold or silver. The brand name implied high quality tobacco or a lucky find. The American Tobacco Company acquired Lucky Strike in 1905, and by the teens, it transitioned to a cigarette brand, aligning with the rising popularity of cigarettes over chewing tobacco. Further throughout the teens and then into the 20s, Lucky Strike's advertising campaigns became revolutionary. They targeted both men and women, which was bold for the time, and slogans like "It's Toasted" were introduced to emphasize the toasting of the tobacco, suggesting superior taste and smoothness, even though all of the other cigarette manufacturers smoke cured their tobacco. If you watched Mad Men, you are probably familiar with this. Um, from 1925 to 1929, sales then skyrocketed due to aggressive marketing. Lucky Strike became the top selling cigarette brand in the United States by 1930. Then, when World War II began, Lucky Strike capitalized with a new ad campaign, which was "The Green Has Gone to War" in 1942. As a result, Lucky Strike's identity became inextricably linked to the war effort and to the soldiers who fought in it. So, to further elaborate on the ad campaign from 42, Lucky Strike changed its cigarette packaging from dark green to white. And they used the phrase, "The Lucky Strike green has gone to war," as their official explanation was that the green dye was needed for the war effort. In truth, it was just that the white packaging performed better with female consumers, which was a growing market on the backs of their previous ad campaigns. This particular campaign was a stroke of genius because it made the marketing decision look like a patriotic decision, which resonated deeply with the public and became an iconic piece of wartime branding. And this landed them in among the cigarette brands included in military rations for U.S. troops overseas. Cigarettes were regularly issued in K rations and C rations. Soldiers often received 4 to 8 cigarettes per meal, and this helped establish brand loyalty among an entire generation. It also became a symbol of the GI experience. For many American GIs, a Lucky Strike became a companion in battle, a way to steady nerves, or a momentary escape from fear. The name itself, Lucky Strike, reinforced the soldier's hope of survival, finding luck, and making it home. Superstitions among soldiers, especially involving cigarettes and luck, were widespread and deeply ingrained in their culture during World War II. They were more than just a habit. They were a kind of talisman, social tool, and comfort item in the trenches and foxholes. Many superstitions grew up around them. One of the most well-known superstitions was the 3 on a match superstition, which originated in World War I but was ubiquitous throughout World War II and even after when the soldiers brought it home with them. And the way that it went was lighting 3 cigarettes with a single match was considered bad luck. And the belief was that by the time you lit the 3rd cigarette, the enemy sniper would have spotted the flame and had time to aim and fire. So even though this was partly practical, a flame in the dark was dangerous, it evolved into ritual avoidance. Veterans would sometimes blow out a match rather than let a third man use it to light their cigarette. Cigarettes also became a sort of lucky charm. So soldiers would often save a lucky cigarette, usually one left unlit in a pack, for later. Some would mark it or turn it upside down in the pack and not smoke it unless they really needed the luck. It was common to have one cigarette saved for when the war ends, or the one to smoke when you make it home. This particular practice extended into giving and receiving cigarettes. So cigarette giving was a ritual of bonding and trust. Giving your last cigarette to a friend or someone about to go into battle was a sign of deep camaraderie. There were stories that refusing a cigarette before battle might jinx you. It suggested that you expected not to need it later, as though you knew you were marching to your death. There were also specific brand rituals and personal rituals. Some people swore by those specific brands, claiming they were luckier than others. Lucky Strike in particular was symbolic, not only because of its name, but because it was popular and widely issued. Opening a pack a certain way or lighting up before a patrol in a particular order became personalized rituals. So why did the superstitions take root? The stress of combat and the constant threat of death meant soldiers craved control over what little they could actually affect. Cigarettes were a common shared item. They were portable, personal, and regularly used, so they naturally became the focus of folklore. And these rituals often offered comfort, routine, and connection, especially when everything else was chaos. So if we treat the American soldier as an archetype according to the Jungian tradition, had to get it in there, a cultural figure embodying deeply rooted themes of sacrifice, resilience, brotherhood, and confrontation with death, then the Lucky Strike cigarette becomes a potent symbol within the archetype's psychic landscape. It establishes the cigarette and the brand as an important symbol of not just identification and representation, but ritual. As a ritual object, smoking a Lucky Strike before combat or after surviving a firefight became a ritual of transformation, from fear to resolve, from chaos to control. The act of lighting a cigarette served as a liminal moment, like crossing a threshold between fear and bravery, or life and death. This mirrors how rituals in all cultures bind the psyche together during a crisis. They were a talisman of identity. Lucky Strike wasn't just a brand, it was a part of the uniform. It was standard issue, like a helmet or a dog tag. It became a symbol of Americanness and of soldierly identity. It aligned with the archetype of the warrior, but colored by a uniquely American value system: stoicism, grit, camaraderie, and industrial pride. It also then can be viewed as a symbol of the collective unconscious. So it could be said that the widespread and almost instinctive way soldiers carried, shared, and ritualized Lucky Strikes suggests it emerged as something beyond rational choice. It became a shared symbol that linked individuals into a greater myth of the American fighting man, quote unquote. Cigarettes also carried the paradox of pleasure and death, a small comfort loaded with danger. This duality mirrors the soldier's own experience of life in war, intensely alive, constantly on the edge of death. Lucky Strike, in this light, becomes a memento mori, a remembrance that you will die. It's a symbolic reminder of your mortality, just as much as it was a comfort. They also became a bridge between worlds. Lucky Strike cigarettes often accompanied letters from home or were smoked during moments of memory or longing. They served as psychic bridges between the war front and the home front, or survival and memorial remembrance. The white packaging, its toasted slogan, and the wartime campaigns made it mythically resonant with themes of endurance, sacrifice, and national purpose. Now we're going to map this onto role play. And I'd like to explore the idea of creating a ritual among party members that increases camaraderie and intensifies the experience of the shared imagined space, as well as the item or items that become representations of the ritual, as well as the party members themselves. So 10 candles immediately comes to mind. The candles are iconic as ritual items as they represent the players as they are snuffed out one by one, just as the candles are. But I'd like to explore this idea for games that don't already have a system mechanism for this type of ritual. I want this to be a more personalized, homebrew suggestion for players to increase emotion, attachment, brotherhood, and present opportunities for role-play forward styles of games. This can be a profoundly meaningful role-play outlet, and also aligned with the mythic ritual-based storytelling at the heart of what I propose tabletop RPGs can be. If we take a model from the insights provided by the history and ritual use of Lucky Strikes as a foundation, we can build behaviors that we can graft onto any game. To do this, we need to blend the practical, the symbolic, and the mythic. To start, we'll first need a mundane object. Let's title this object, whatever it happens to be in your game, the strike, as in striking the match. This is a sort of, the item represents an initiation of sorts. So I'm going to select a spoon, right? And each party member is going to eat with it during a rest. It's that simple. The spoon as the ritual object will evoke survival because it's about eating, warmth, and sustenance, as well as equality, because each member is going to be sharing from the same spoon and the same pot or the same meal, but with a very deliberate intent behind it. It's not just, hey, dinner's ready, come and get it. It's very deliberate. And then later, when we incorporate the spoon into the ritual itself, you'll see it also involves order and memory. Sequence is going to matter, and also grief when a member goes missing or dies or leaves the group for some reason. This will break the rhythm of the ritual, and it will become a sort of a memorial for that person, that character. But I'll talk about those later. So let's formalize this into a diegetic ritual that players can easily adopt. You can name the ritual if you like. I'm going to creatively call this one the spoon ritual. Likewise, you can also name the ritual objects. I'm not going to here beyond the spoon. I actually like the mundanity, and I think it makes a ritual action more profound if an item retains its quiet commonness, but feel free to name away. So the spoon's going to be kept in with the party's mess gear, right? Doesn't matter who's carrying it. They could all even individually have a spoon, but there's this one spoon that's carried along with the common mess gear that is going to be used for the ritual. The context is going to be around the fire or a cooking pot, wherever the group eats, only with one another. So no like party dining. If you happen to be at some social function, you're not going to whip the spoon out. And this is going to be especially important after days of hardship, survival, or combat. It can also be invoked during moments of peace or otherwise calm, but the liminal, transitional meaning is really going to be significant after a day of hardship or survival. So the ritual itself we're going to call the light, as in lighting a cigarette. This is the active process of going through the ritual to experience the meaning. So the meal is prepared, it's cooked, and it's placed in a pot over the campfire while it is cooking. The first member of the party takes the spoon, sticks it into the pot, takes a single bite, and then replaces the spoon in the pot. The next person retrieves it, takes a bite, replaces it the same way. And the order that the characters take their bites should be set and not change intentionally. It should be treated with superstition until it is made sacred over time. This way, if a member of the party dies or is otherwise lost, their absence is magnified through the confusion of what happens next in the ritual. Whose turn is it? Can you take your bite without the preceding member taking theirs? And this we will call the burn, as in the cigarette burning down and being consumed. The cigarette's a small personal ritual that is consumed each time it's invoked. Each cigarette is unique, and so the nature of each ritual is slightly different than the last when something changes. When a PC dies or leaves, the ritual as you knew it is over, just like the individual cigarette. It is consumed. It's burned. A new one must take its place, and while it will look like the last one and maybe feel familiar, it will be different. This is not all to say that there's some measure of solemnity with this ritual, right? You can talk during the ritual, and the object of creating these structures within your games is to provide those role play opportunities. So I'm not sitting here telling you to shut your players up while they go through this ritual. There should be camaraderie. There should be joking. Maybe you take your spoonful and fling it at someone else in the face, but it's like those decisions that the players make will then become a part of the ritual, and it will reinforce the role play. It will reinforce camaraderie. I'll get there, I swear. And it will really aid in putting your players in the headspace of their characters. So after all of this, the meal is then portioned out and consumed as any other normal meal would be. The spoon can be used to dish it out, or it can be packed away. Whoever owns the spoon can use it as a normal, regular, mundane spoon with which they eat their meals. But don't skip the steps or otherwise complete them on autopilot or assume their completion. Don't fast travel this. The whole point of the ritual is to focus the players as their characters and bind them together in an act of role play. So will this even work? Why will it work? I think it will, because we have the evidence that it does in games like 10 Candles, but this is an enumerated list of why it will work. So it creates a shared symbolic space. Rituals, especially those rooted in shared survival, pull characters, or pardon me, it pulls the players into the internal logic of the world as their characters. The spoon isn't just a spoon. The meal isn't just a meal. It represents a threshold crossed, a battle won, survival maintained. It is passing from uncertainty of the events before into the certainty of the moment. It is fear to control. It is death to life. Once the group accepts that, every use of the spoon in the ritual becomes a moment of role play. Players begin treating it in character, not as a game prop. It becomes a symbol of the group's identity. When someone says, "Where's the spoon?" or "Get the spoon," it won't feel like a character asking after an item. It will feel like a soldier crying out for a moment of connection. And it builds ritual memory. So by having players participate in a ritual act as their characters, repeating a pattern every night, or every rest rather, they start remembering it like the characters do. They're not pretending the bond anymore. They're actively forming it through the repetition. It establishes continuity and rhythm within the fiction. Like combat or exploration, it becomes a scene type in the campaign. It is the ritual scene, one that isn't about tactics or mechanics, but feeling, memory, and presence. In other words, of role play. It reinforces group cohesion in character. Most parties form bonds through action, saving each other, laughing in the face of danger, fighting enemies. This ritual will frame that bond. It's an internal ceremony of unity, and it gives each character a place in the group order, which can then be used to reaffirm roles, but it doesn't have to. It's also democratic. You all share the same spoon, the same pot, the same fire. And as a result, moments of meaning will naturally emerge, not from rules or mechanics, but from embedded significance based on the expectation that players will read into it. Players will help weave the myth rather than follow it. They will be creating it. And it provides organic openings for roleplay. Most games struggle to make space for things like grief or reverence or subtle emotional expression or even just plain old camaraderie and friendship, but in an intimate setting. The spoon ritual creates that space effortlessly. A missing character's turn becomes a moment of silence. New characters can be integrated by assigning them a place in the order. It's very natural. And characters in conflict can break or refuse the ritual, which can become a huge in-character statement. A broken ritual becomes a symbol of the party in conflict, and it is a huge opportunity for the expression of that relationship in the role play. So it's a built-in invitation for role play, subtle or otherwise, every single time it's performed. It rewards investment without needing mechanics, and it inserts a natural pause in the fiction. Players can quietly shift, reveal, or deepen aspects of their characters without a forced monologue or a spotlight grab, and it is extremely important that this can all be done without the need for picking up dice or for checking a character sheet. It remains an in-character role-play activity. And as a result, it supports a role-play first tone. So the games I prefer, and I know I've said this before, they're generally reliant on players to self-direct their own immersion. They need to be proactive role players. Even in games that aren't as player-directed, the spoon ritual, or any ritual of this sort, whatever you come up with, becomes a tool for players who want to lean into seriousness or vulnerability or bonding roleplay, but who might feel more comfortable in a shared structure to do so. It gently shifts the tone when invoked. It expects all players to step into character, and it becomes a shared establishment of depth, but without ever forcing it. Perhaps most importantly, once the players come to rely on the ritual, none of this, again, will need prompting or dice. Establishing the ritual will open a doorway to the interaction and the role play without the need for external factors, such as rules, mechanics, and dice. And I know that I'm belaboring that point, but I think that that is the most important part of this particular suggestion. So yours doesn't have to be this specific, the spoon ritual that I cited for the video, or created rather. I made it up to illustrate my points. The ritual becomes a sort of mythic campfire, always waiting for the players to return. And as is true in all great myths, what matters is not the item or the practice, but what they mean. Thank you so much. I hope this has sparked an interest in incorporating rituals into your own games. And please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, everyone.